You're watching the Everything Network. Sonny Red Indelicado was a captain in New York City's Bonanno crime family who was murdered with two other capos in an infamous gangland slaying. Born in New York City, Indelicado was a stocky man with broad shoulders, a sculpted torso, and dark hair. On his left arm, he had one tattoo of two hearts and a dagger, and a second tattoo that said Hall in 1945. The meaning of the second tattoo is unclear. He wore large tinted sunglasses, which may have been adopted from Bonanno captain Cesar Bonventa. He preferred bright, garish, casual clothing, orange t-shirts, bright red shorts, baseball jackets, striped tracksuits, multicolored socks, and blue jeans. He was particularly fond of a pair of custom-made red leather cowboy boots, which may have been the source of his nickname, Sonny Red. Other mobsters described Indelicato as being opinionated, charismatic, and swaggering. He was a violent man. He once drove an ice pick through a victim's chest into the floor below, requiring a tire iron to pry the body loose. Indelicato's family came from Siculiana, in Agrigento, Sicily. He was the father-in-law of Bonanno associate Salvador Valenti and ex-son-in-law of Bonanno capo Charles Rivolo. Indelicato was also related to Gerald Thomas Indelicato, an education advisor to Governor of Massachusetts Michael Dukakis, and Giuseppe Indelicato, a heroin trafficker. He was married first to Rivolo's daughter, with whom he fathered his son, Anthony Indelicato. He later married Margaret Elizabeth McFadden, but the two later became estranged. Sonny introduced his son to organized crime at an early age. Father and son socialized and conducted business together. In 1950, Sonny was convicted in New York of possession of heroin and served 6 months in jail. On December 26, 1951, he participated in a shooting at a social club that left one man dead and another wounded. The wounded victim later identified Indelicato as the shooter. Indelicato was convicted of murder and attempted murder and sentenced to 12 years at Sing Sing State Penitentiary in Ossining, New York. In 1966, Indelicato was released from prison and placed on lifetime parole due to his major involvement with organized crime narcotics distribution. These parole restrictions would keep Indelicato from attending the wedding of Sicilian mob boss Giuseppe Bono. Over the next 15 years, Indelicato built a strong power base in the Bonanno family, with those who were unhappy with boss Restelli's leadership. Indelicato could count on the support of at least 4 Bonanno captains, with each capo controlling an estimated half-dozen to a dozen other soldiers. Indelicato's faction was a tight-knit, significant force. He was cocky towards boss Philip Restelli and disrespectful to captains Joseph Massino and Dominic Napolitano, but dismissive toward the Bonanno family's Sicilian faction. Indelicato was in a solid position to seize control of the family from boss Philip Restelli. He had strong connections to the other 5 families of New York, including senior members of the Colombo crime family. Sonny and his Bonanno rivals had been profiting from the distribution of the Sicilian faction's heroin from Montreal. In late 1980 or 1981, Indelicato allegedly received a heroin shipment worth $1.5 million on consignment from Giolando Sciascia and Joseph Lopresti, but then later refused to pay for it. Vincent Giganti was backing Indelicato at the time. At the time of his murder, Indelicato was being investigated for his suspected role in the 1972 slaying of Colombo crime family capo Joey Gallo. Then 1974, boss Filippo Restelli was sent to prison, just as Joseph Bonanno's former right-hand man and longtime Bonanno power, Carmine Galante, was being released from prison after serving a lengthy prison sentence. Upon his release, Galante felt that he was owed the position of boss, and no one else in the family was his equal. Galante made it clear that he wanted to assume total control of the family from Restelli, as well as anointing himself as the boss of all bosses, amongst the other families. Galante cornered the heroin market and refused to share the profits with any of the other families. He also used the Sicilian faction of the Bonanno family known as the Zips, as his personal bodyguards. In a display of power, Carmine declared war on the Genovese and Gambino crime families, gunning down several of their soldiers in attempt to make them bow down to him as the boss of bosses. However, the other families became fed up with the cigar problem, and the commission approved a hit on Galante. It was said they even reached out to the original father of the Bonanos, Joe Bonanno, who also agreed that Galante should be hit. In 1979, Dominic Napolitano, Dominic Trinchera, and Anthony Indelicato murdered Galante in a New York restaurant. Alphonse Indelicato, who was aligned with the Galante faction of the Bonanos, attempted to take over as boss, but was thwarted by Dominic Napolitano and other Restelli loyalists. After the murder of these three captains, Sonny Black Napolitano became the acting street boss of the Bonanos, while Restelli finished out his sentence in prison. The Indelicato faction included Philip Giacone, Dominic Trinchera, Sonny's son Anthony, Indelicato's brother Joseph Indelicato, Michael Sabella, Frank Lino, Nicholas Marangello, Stephen Maruca, and Cesar Bonventure. As the feud progressed, Sabella, Maruca, and Marangello switched sides to Restelli. Red was reluctant to start a civil war inside the Bonanno family, and therefore met with Restelli loyalists to discuss a compromise. However, the meeting was unsuccessful, and Sonny Red prepared for a struggle. He then agreed to a second meeting to try again for an agreement. The second meeting was scheduled on May 5, 1981, at Brooklyn's Embassy Terrace. That morning, Indelicato ordered the men not attending the meeting to disperse themselves around the city. If the meeting went badly, they would be safe from retaliation. Some men stayed in Indelicato's Staten Island territory, while others went to Thomas Patera's home in Brooklyn. Before heading to the meeting, Indelicato told Frank Lino, Philip Giacone, and Dominic Trinchera, "If there is shooting, everybody is on their own. Try to get out." At the meeting, Giolando Ciascia escorted the three capos into a storeroom in the restaurant. Salvador Vitali and two other Bonanno gunmen stepped out of a closet, said, "Don't anybody move. This is a stick-up," and started shooting. Indelicato, Giacone, and Trinchera knew at that instant that their worst suspicions had been realized. They had been lured into a trap. The captains were shot to death with shotguns and pistols. Sonny Red. Indelicato tried to run out the exit, but fell when a shotgun blast hit him. The three capos were unarmed, as was the rule when attending a peace meeting. The mobsters delivered the bodies to a vacant lot in Ozone Park, Queens, used by the Gambino family as a graveyard. Several Gambino mobsters then buried the bodies. The site was later called Gangland Graveyard. According to FBI agent Donnie Brasco, the murderers were Dominic Napolitano, John Sassani, Joseph Massino, Massino's brother-in-law Salvador Vitali, Joseph Di Simone, Nicolas Santora, Vito Rizzuto, Santo Giordano, amongst others. Benjamin Ruggiero and John Sassani were lookouts and were sent in after to clean up the massacre and dispose of the bodies, along with Dominic Napolitano and a few others. After his father's murder, Sonny's son Anthony went into hiding in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Joseph Massino wanted to kill him also, but he had missed the meeting. His father brought Frank Lino instead, who was the sole survivor of the massacre, because he escaped the club last second, which saved his life. The Restelli faction tasked Donnie Brasco with finding and killing Anthony Indelicato, which quickened Brasco's removal from his undercover operation. Years later, Anthony went back to work for the family and took over his father's old crew. On May 24, 1981, 2 weeks after the murders, children playing football in the lot were drawn by an odd smell to a section of dirt and garbage. Kicking the loose in soil, a boy discovered a hand. The boy told his parents, who called police. New York police officer Andrew Silenti arrived at the lot to find a body wrapped in a bedsheet. Fingerprints were successfully retrieved from the body and later identified the victim as Sonny Red. 4 days later, Red's son-in-law, Salvador Valenti, identified the body. New York City Police Department's Cold Case Squad did not discover the remains of Iacone and Trinchera until 2004. After Rastelli's 1991 death in prison, Massino became the official boss of the Bonanno family. In 2004, with the help of now government informant Salvador Vitali, Joseph Massino was convicted of ordering 7 murders, including those of Indelicato, and was sentenced to life in prison.